Welcome everybody, and very nice to see so many of you in our webinar this afternoon. Thank you for joining us. My name is Patrick Pheasant and I'm the Chief Executive Officer of NES Australia, and thank you for joining this webinar on 21st century skills in English language teaching. Now, if you're like me and are calling in from a place in lockdown, my heart goes out to you in these tough times. But I'm really happy that you can join us online and connect in some way to our English language teaching community. If you're joining us from outside of Australia, welcome. It's great to have you here in our webinar. We'll be talking about 21st century skills in English language teaching, both in an Australian context, but also trying to make it relevant for our participants who are joining us from outside of Australia. So thank you everyone for participating. This is actually a webinar format. So throughout the webinar, feel free to ask any questions in the Q&A. I will stop throughout the webinar and answer those if I can. And certainly anything that I don't get to before the end of this webinar, we will follow up and endeavour to answer those questions for you in a follow-up email. This webinar is being recorded, and you can also use the chat function, and we'll be using the poll function as well throughout the webinar. So let's begin by just having a quick look at what the outcomes are for this session. I'm hoping to explore with you what my understanding is of 21st century skills, and also share with you what experience our members are having with design and delivery of their English language programs. We'll be looking at some theory and a little bit of research about 21st century skills, and including those in an English language classroom. And we'll also explore how the notion of 21st century skills has changed and grown, and especially in the last 18 months because of COVID, has been completely turned around with new views on what's important to be teaching in our English language classrooms. And a lot of this information is gained through sharing with the NES endorsed centres, looking at courses that are provided by NES endorsed centres, and being in what I consider to be a really privileged position, which is to be able to understand what English language teaching centres across all sectors are doing, both in the last 12 to 18 months, but also over the years with their courses. So focus questions, just to get your head into the right space. I'd like you just to take a moment to choose one of these questions, just choose one, and I'd like you just to put a pen to paper or just take a note answering this question to yourself. So I'm just going to pause for a minute. You can choose question number 1. How can you implement 21st century skills into your class? Or you might choose question 2, how has recent transformation impacted the way you view teaching English? You might choose question 3, how can we embed 21st century skills more widely in the student experience, not just in our classrooms? Or question 4, what are the barriers for teaching 21st century skills? So choose one. Just going to give you a minute just to take a note. You might just have a think about your own answer at this point to one of these focus questions. For popping those nice kind words in the chat. Great to see that we have members from all over Australia and internationally as well today. So big shout out to you all. And I hope you've had a chance just to kind of get your head into the context of 21st century skills as a place to start for today's presentation. So as I said, a lot of this presentation is drawn from NES's experience with our English language centres and with endorsing courses, but also we endorse agents. We've recently started endorsing ELT professionals over the last 12 months, and we also endorse quality products and services. So a lot of this information that I'm sharing with you today is drawn from the NES ecosystem and from our work with all parts of the English language teaching community. We've also recently, in the last 12 months, been reviewing our quality assurance framework. This is available on the website. It's open source. We can share it. And if you are endorsed by us, it's there for you to use. But if you're not endorsed by us, you can also have a look at our framework as well. Throughout our framework, in different places, are mentions of providing an experience for the student that's contextual and related to their position as a 21st century citizen. So you can find in the framework some hints and some guides on how to embed 21st century skills into your programs. But we're going to talk a little bit more specifically about it today, and I do hope that you walk away at the end of the webinar with some ideas on how you can embed these skills into your programs. So let's hear a little bit from you. Cam, my trusty technical assistant, is going to throw a poll up for you. And I'd like to hear who's in the room. Tell us a little bit about yourself. Are you an English language teacher? Are you a student, a business owner? Are you from professional staff and admin or a government employee? Or are you, like me, a dreamer and a poet? Just going to leave that poll open for another couple of seconds. Okay, we might end it there and show the results of the poll. I'm just going to share the results with you. So we've got majority English language teachers in the room, a couple of business owners and professional staff, and another dreamer and poet. So if that's you, I see you. Okay, let's find a little bit more about our kind of demographics in the webinar today. So we've got do we have boomers in the room, or do we have Gen X, Gen Y, Gen Z, Gen A, or you have no idea what these things mean? So we're going to open the poll again, and I'd like you to nominate where you sit. Okay, and I think we'll close the poll there and we'll have a little bit of a chat about who we've got in the room. Okay, so luckily we have no Gen A's in the room, and that's a good thing, because Generation A, Generation Alpha, is our most recent generation of citizens, of people. And these are children that are born in 2012 and afterwards. So I'm glad there's no Gen A's in the room. We've got a lot of baby boomers in the room. Now, these are people who are born between 1946 and 1964. We've got majority Gen X, like myself, born between 1965 and 1980. We've got some Gen Ys. Oh, these are millennials, another name for Gen Ys. These are people born between 1981 and 1996. And a couple of Gen Zs, born between 1997 and 2012. Now, I asked this question because, 21st century skills, 21st century began, almost 20 years ago. And we've been talking about 21st century skills for about 30 years. And the concept of 21st century skills has changed rapidly. It's been completely turned on its head in the last 12 to 18 months, but it's not a new concept. And importantly, a skill set for people in the 21st century, 21st century is going to change depending on what generation they're from. So people that we are teaching today are going to be entering into jobs that we don't know about. They haven't been invented yet. People who are coming through our courses in the future that we design today will have really different need sets and really different outcomes and objectives. So the concept of 21st century skills, my point here is it's dynamic, it's changing, and it's going to change, consistently. So it depends on where we're at, depends on what's happening in the world, but it also depends on the generation of students that you have in the classroom. So thanks for that, Cam. We'll do a bit of a chat call out now, because I'm interested to hear what words come to mind when you think of 21st century skills? So I'd like you to jump into the chat room and just throw the first word that comes to mind into the chat room when we talk about 21st century skills. So please, if everyone could just throw a word in. We've got online, we've got people saying digital literacy, transferable skills, adaptability, e-learning, challenging. Yeah. What else? Digital skills. So we've got a bit of a trend here, things to do with online, things to do with digital skills, technology. What else? Throw something in the chat room if you haven't already. Computers. Motivation, fluidity, intercultural competency. Yeah, brilliant. Okay, great. So we've got a real wide range here. And what I'm hoping that you will get by the end of this is a list of 25 21st century skills. And we'll talk about kind of how I've come to that list. And we'll look at ways that we can apply those 21st century skills into our classrooms, our English language teaching classrooms. So, 21st century skills have been around, as I mentioned, for about 30 years. We began talking about these in the 1990s. As you know, the 21st century actually began in the beginning of 2001. So we've been in the 21st century for the last 20 odd years. And I think it's really important to note that 21st century skills or competencies have been embedded in nearly every formal education system worldwide. Nearly every OECD country has had some consideration on the skills needed to develop people to be ready for the 21st century. And considerations of what these skills are is changing rapidly. It depends on where you look and who you speak to. And I think it's even more important right now when we have the whole concept of English language teaching and English language speaking is changing. We're moving from a reliance on native speakers and people who speak English as their first language, teaching other second language speakers. We're moving away from that trend now, where the majority of the world who speak English are second language or foreign language speakers of English. And, this is growing rapidly. I mean, one of the kind of pieces I read in preparing for this webinar, looking at, the number of English speakers by 2050 will surpass 4 billion people in the world. And, close to 1 billion of those will be native speakers. The other 3 billion will be non-native speakers of English. So what does it mean to speak English and use English is changing. And also, what does it mean to have a skill set in English is changing as well. So why is this so important for English language teaching? Well, I mean, COVID has accelerated the inevitable. Our student pathways, which is where the majority of us teach, have been disrupted and are completely changing. General English, EAP, test preparation programs, those are now being delivered in what were traditionally source countries for Australia in the Australian context. They're accelerating and they're improving, and they're being offered in the country at a very low cost. So we've got to do something in Australia with our English language programs to change, to complement that, to understand that that's happening, and to be prepared to add onto that. So Australian providers, I think, need to really rethink how they engage with international students at different levels of their life cycle. It's not just about getting students on campus in Australia and teaching them a long pathway, moving from general English into EAP, English for academic purposes, into a direct entry program, into an on-campus experience, and then sending them home. That has all changed thanks to COVID, and we need to change with it. And one way to do that is to think about 21st century skills and make them a main component of what we teach in our English language programs here in Australia and how we teach students. So I'm going to draw on a little bit of background reading about 21st century skills, but I'm also going to bring in graduate attributes, because I think these are really important skills to be enthusing and embedding into our English language programs, because majority of our students will move through to university, and if we can align with the university graduate attributes, the key skills that our universities are saying their graduates have, then we can make our programs more relevant and more interesting and more engaging for students. And I'm also going to bring in some career readiness areas as well. There's a lot of research that's being done on how we can prepare students to be global citizens of the future. And I think these are important skills to embed and enthuse into our English language programs. So it's about repurposing ELICOS, because ELICOS in the traditional sense is dying. We need to reinvigorate it, we need to reinvent it, and we need to work with our international partners to make a really wonderful experience for international students along every step of the way. So the context from the NES endorsed organisations that I'm bringing to you, we have 189 NES endorsed centres and over 1,000 endorsed courses. These are all listed on our website, and they've all been through the NES quality assurance framework and process. Yet only 70 of those courses make reference to 21st century skills in their syllabus or curriculum. I think that's a great number, but in the context of 1,000 courses, it's a very, very small amount of courses, English language courses, are actually trying to address development of these skills. And actually, there are 0 courses that are specifically 100% devoted to the teaching and learning of 21st century skills in English language teaching. So my challenge to you is, do you want to be the first? Do you want to create an amazing course that looks at teaching English, but also making it relevant and making it meaningful for students by pushing up to a high priority development of 21st century skills? That's my call to action. So let's look at the basics. Let's look at what are the traditional 4 21st century skills. Now, these are, the most popular. They're the ones that are referred to the most in the literature. And I want you to have a think. What do you think they are? There's 4 of them. They start with C. I just want you to jump into the chat room and just throw what you think are these 4 key skills into the chat room. So we've got communication. Yes, that's one of them. What else? Okay, someone's just rattled them off. We've got creativity. We've got collaboration. Compassion, I love that. It's not one of these 4, but I think it's a pretty important thing and something that we could do more of, in the classroom. We've got creativity. Good. So we've got the 4. The 4 are communication, collaboration, critical thinking, and creativity. Now, these are the kind of 4 C's. They're really easy to remember. Creativity is about thinking outside of the box. Collaboration is about working with others. Communication, of course, the key to every English language teaching experience is communication, and all of us are very well versed in communicative competence and the traditional style of teaching English, which has communication at its core. Communication is really important, but arguably I think critical thinking is probably one of the most important qualities for a student in the classroom to be developing these days, and certainly in a professional setting and an academic setting, it's paramount. So these 4 C's, you're all probably very well aware of these, but why are they so popular? Well, they've been considered for a long time. They were considered to be critical for the 21st century before we even began the 21st century. There's a lot of information on how they can be taught, how they can be learned, and how they can be developed. And they're very context-based, so they can be transferred to a lot of different subjects. So if you're teaching, for example, English for medicine or English for engineering, you can really bring these 4 C's into that context, in an easy way. And there's a lot of overlap between them as well. If you haven't actually worked on 21st century skills or haven't put them inside of your classroom yet, there's a very, very simple way to do it. So if this is new to you and you've been teaching English and you're thinking, wow, I want to make sure I'm developing critical thinking, creativity, collaboration, and communication in my classroom, here's a really simple way. And I've seen this done in a number of the NES endorsed centres in their syllabus design. You can go to the Common European Framework of Reference, and you can actually put into the supplementary descriptors these keywords. So I just did it for you here to show you how easy it is to structure a syllabus around these 4 Cs and include them, align them with language levels using the CEFR. So if you put critical thinking into the CEFR descriptor, into the supplementary descriptions, which is available on their website, put critical thinking in, you'll get dozens of descriptors that you can use as rubrics in your assessment and as outcomes in your course design. So have a go at doing this, and it's a really easy way. Put critical thinking in. I've just done it for you here and drawn 2 out of the dozens that are available. Critical thinking being the ability to assess the value of a claim or information and come to a conclusion about what to believe or what to do about it. Some example descriptors that you can use from CFR are can identify differences in sociolinguistic pragmatic conventions, critically reflect on them and adjust their communication accordingly, or can understand short texts on subjects that are familiar or of current interest. So this is a very simple way for you to embed 21st century skills in your classes. I did the same with creativity for you. So creativity being the development of something that is new or useful in each social context, that's the definition. If you throw creativity into the CEFR, you can get dozens of different course descriptors at each of the CEFR levels, and that allows you then to start enthusing the 21st century skills into your programs. Just for collaboration, I did another quick share for you. Collaboration being the construction of shared meaning by a pool of individuals, the ability to work effectively and respectively with diverse teams, and demonstrating this shared responsibility for collaborative work, as well as valuing individuals' contributions. Throw collaboration into the CEFR and you'll get dozens of different descriptors that can help you construct meaningful tasks and rubrics and assessment items in your course. So that's a great place to start. And if you do that, I think you've come a really, really long way with embedding 21st century skills in English language teaching. But let's take it a bit further. Communication, same thing. Let's take it a bit further and look at what some other areas and countries are doing with development of 21st century skills. So this is a set of skills that have been taken from an American group from the Partnership for 21st Century Skills. They've looked at developing 21st century skills in K-12. And look, if you don't think this is relevant to English language teaching of adults, bear in mind that, you know, we've got these millennials and these Generation Zs and Generation As coming through into our programs who are coming from K-12 experiences where they've been addressing these 21st century skills. So there's going to be an expectation that they continue to develop those skills in everything that they do, including their English language teaching. So important to note, there's an addition here, as well as those 4 Cs, there's addition of interest, engagement, and self-regulation. And, you know, interest is a really interesting 21st century skill, something to embed in. It's really about, it's a multi-dimensional concept, interest. It's a little bit like motivation. You can have intrinsic interest, which lasts for much longer, and you can explore developing that with students, or you can have like multi-situational or multi-dimensional interest, which is external interest, and that, like extrinsic motivation, lasts a little bit shorter. So there are ways to embed, like motivation, embed development of that skill set inside the classroom. So developing interest and curiosity is really important. Developing engagement is important. And, you know, there's a whole range of types of engagement that you can develop inside the classroom. There's task engagement, there's academic engagement, there's emotional engagement, behavioral engagement, there's aesthetic engagement or dramatic engagement. So, within that concept of engagement as a skill, there's a whole bunch of sub-skills that you can explore in the classroom with students. And then self-regulation is another key skill set from their viewpoint that's important to include as well. And self-regulation, it's really identical to self-regulated learning, and it's about developing self-efficacy and developing language learning strategies, emotional strategies inside the classroom. So a couple of additional skills to add there to our list. So I'm just going to check the question and answer and open up the floor if you have any questions that I can answer up until this point. So a few questions that have just come through on the Q&A. Someone's asked if you'll get a copy of the presentation. So the answer is yes. This presentation is made available along with this video on NES Online. So we'll be giving you information at the end of this session on how to access the presentation and the video. Someone's also asked about elaborating on the differences between collaboration, participation, and involvement. And, from my perspective and the perspective of this webinar, not much difference there. Collaboration is really about acknowledging that the team is important as well as the individual. I think participation is more about the individual participating in group work. And I think involvement is another way to describe participation. I'm just checking the chat room. Okay, good. Any more questions? Just throw them into the Q&A as we move through. Okay. So there's more. So as well as those 4 C's and those 3 extra elements of interest and self-regulation and engagement, there's another group called the Applied Education Systems, and the links there, we'll be sharing all of these links with you at the end of the session, that look at development and inclusion of literacy skills and life skills into teaching. And looking at literacy skills, you've got your media literacy, your technology literacy, and information literacy, and included in there, I think we can add digital literacy as well as another term that's become really popular over the last 12 to 18 months. And with information literacy, we're looking here at how you can help students understand facts and figures and statistics. Media literacy is, understanding the methods and the outlets in which information is published. So, the online space, the internet, and so on. Technology literacy or digital literacy is really understanding how to do things, in an online space. All very important. All can be taught explicitly, and all can be embedded into our English language programs. Life skills starts to take a little bit more broadly. So, this is the final category of a set of categories that the Applied Education Systems group came up with for 21st century skills, and looks at skills pertaining to someone's workplace or membership of a future organization. So we've got flexibility, is about deviating from plans as needed. Leadership, which is about motivating a team or other students to succeed a goal. Initiative, that's starting projects and making strategies and doing plans. We've got productivity, maintaining efficiency in this crazy age of distractions, and social skills, which is about meeting and networking with others for mutual benefit. So another view and another way to come at digital, at 21st century skills. So we're building here, we're getting to the 25. We've got critical thinking, we've got creativity, we've talked about problem solving as well, which is another way of saying critical thinking. We've got collaboration, we've got interest and motivation. A really, really great piece of research that's been done just before COVID about key skills for the 21st century. It's really a great review that's got a lot of research behind it by Marion Doak. They talk about these key competencies being key skills for the 21st century. And I like how they've added in here, as well as the ones we've talked about, they've added metacognition, self-efficacy, and specifically conscientiousness and grit or perseverance. So these last three here, especially the last two, conscientiousness and grit or perseverance, we're really extending the definition of what it means to be a 21st century student. And again, any of these words you can throw into the CEFR, the CEFA on their system, and you can get different descriptors against each of these. Something that I think that is really current and really relevant, and I've seen a lot of in recent literature, and we've been talking, about it madly for the last 12 months, is the sense of developing agility and developing adaptability. So this builds, it's very current, I think, and it's very pertinent to COVID and our current state. And there's a lot of new literature and new research on building out adaptability and agility in students. And you're all probably very aware of, intelligence quota and IQ and the components of that. Many of us are exploring emotional intelligence already in our classrooms and exploring how students can explore in the classroom, regulating and moderating their emotions, being aware of their emotions and utilizing their emotions to enhance their learning. That's, there's a lot of theory and a lot of research behind that. But I think what's relatively new is looking at this agility. What does it mean to be agile, and what does it mean to be adaptable? And some great information and some great research about this. But to me, the key difference between adaptability and agility is adaptability is about surviving and responding. It takes a lot of energy because you've got to be on your feet, you've got to pivot all the time, and you've got to respond. Whereas agility is about developing that light-footedness or developing that sense of flow. So when something unknown comes along, you can go with it. You can go with the flow. You can ease into the change rather than try to fight it. So I think there's a kind of key difference there. And I believe there's ways that we can teach our students to be more agile within the English language learning classroom. Okay, so my final piece that I'm bringing to this is graduate attributes, and then we'll talk about how it all relates to English language teaching. So I did a bit of a review. This is, nearly every university in Australia has a list of graduate attributes, and there's a great piece of research that's been done that looked at all of the graduate attributes across all of the universities in Australia. Now, bearing in mind, this is where we're sending our students. So if we can, retrofit our ELICOS programs with development of graduate attributes, we're going to make the transition and make the connection with those pathway programs to universities much stronger and much more relevant. So I think the graduate attributes are really important to have a look at. And, key graduate attribute across all of the Australian universities is communication skills. 32 out of 39 universities have this as a graduate attribute. I think a new one that's adding to our definition of 21st century skills is ethical conduct and a sense of social responsibility. And I think this is a really key 21st century skill that can be added into our programs. And then we've got global perspective and sense of citizenship. Nearly 30 universities have added this as a graduate attribute. Critical thinking, about 28 of them, and teamwork skills. So these are the top 5. And out of that top 5, we can add another 2 to our list, ethical conduct and sense of social responsibility and global perspective and sense of citizenship. If you look at some of the unusual graduate attributes that our universities have in Australia, you'll come up with some really left field 21st century skills. And I think these are really interesting to include as well. So Murdoch and University of Melbourne and ACU, this was almost 10 years ago, so it might have changed a little bit now, but certainly they still have social justice promotion as a key attribute or as a key quality. And, it's a great question to ask ourselves as English language teachers: how do we cover social justice, and how do we try to broach that in our classrooms to develop skill sets for students in that? Indigeneity is something for University of Melbourne and UWS they've put on, and that's a very Australian context, but it's relevant to every nation and every country in the world, and where our students come from have their own versions of Indigenous people. So there's that concept and that competence to explore. Sustainability is one that's listed at a number of universities. Research proficiency is a key one, and also tolerance. And that's a great one to add, I think. That's from Notre Dame. So I'm trying to piece all of this together so we've got a really wide picture of 21st century skills. So I'm going to jump right back to you folks who are in the webinar today. And this is the list. This is the list of 25 21st century skills that you might want to consider embedding into your programs. And I'm just going to throw out to you, pop in the chat. Let's do a chat call out. Can you jump right into chat, and can you put which one you think is the most important out of this list of 25? So jump on the chat if you're able, and let's throw in what you think is the most important. We've got some people saying creativity, agility, communication, adaptability, self-efficacy. We've got a range of answers here. People are really kind of choosing different ones, which is great. Creativity comes up again and again, probably because this is something that's really familiar to everybody. Agility, someone's just noted in the chat there, that agility is a key competency to develop, bearing in mind the last 12 months. And good to see that we've got people talking about sustainability as well. Someone's added flexibility, which is on the list. Yeah, brilliant. And tolerance, great. So we've got a range of priorities there for people. Let's move into now having a kind of a bit of a discussion on how this can be applied to your English language teaching classroom, because it's all good to have this list, but if there's not a way to apply it, then it's all a bit useless. So when teaching millennials, and especially in an English language classroom, this is some advice from some of the research and the theorists. So some critical elements for developing 21st century skills in ELT. We've got, don't lose track of your core subjects. So, never forget, we've got listening, reading, writing, and speaking to look at. It is an English language teaching class, so we should always remain focused on developing English language abilities. So emphasize those core subjects in your classes. I'm not suggesting we need to throw out the baby with the bathwater, and we've got to retain our expertise that we all have in teaching English language. But you can emphasize learning skills, and you can make them a priority. Some other advice: use 21st century tools to develop those learning skills. So we're using Zoom now, but there's a plethora of different tools that you can use to engage students both in the virtual space, but also when they're actually in the classroom as well. So use modern tools. Continually explore new ways of teaching, and by doing that, you're going to explore and get students more au fait with the 21st century skills by using those tools. Teach and learn in a 21st century context. So if you've got old readings and you've got old realia that you're using from textbooks that are even 12 months old, you are running the risk that, or you're losing the opportunity to be introducing these 21st century skills within your realia. So rethink what types of materials you're giving students, what types of readings you're having them do, what types of source materials you're using, and make sure it's really, really current. By doing that, you are teaching and learning in a 21st century and context, and you're also using 21st century content. And finally, this is kind of really a big discussion at the moment, is how do we assess all of these things? How do you embed assessment of 21st century skills in your English language program? And we talked about one way, and that's going to the CEFA and looking up these 21st century skills and using them from the supplementary descriptors, embedding those into your program design, making sure they are part of your course outcomes, your lesson outcomes, and your activities, and referring students as much as you can to those descriptors. So that's a simple and effective way to get the assessment happening. But I think also you've got to use tools around peer assessment, you 360 degrees assessment, have multiple rapid assessment rather than large assessment at the end of the program, and really think about what do you want to teach, what context do you want to put students in, and how are you going to give them feedback on that and then assess it. So application to English language teaching. And this is, I'm going to just give you a kind of a list of advice that I've collected from different NEAS members. And these are people who have been thinking and talking about 21st century skills and trying to put those into their classrooms. These are pieces of advice I've got that I'm sharing with you. One is about making the classroom content all about current state versus future state. So creating opportunities for students to have discussion with you and with each other about what is the current state that they're in now, what's the current state of their ability, and what's the future state, how do they get to that? So exploring those two, I guess, dualities within the conversation that you're having with students is a way to get students to be thinking about developing 21st century skills. Another piece of advice is use inquiry-based teaching and learning. So, I really use these principles inside the classroom, create questions and problems for students, give students the opportunity to develop their 21st century skills by addressing a real problem for them, and really focus on not driving the bus inside the classroom, but provoking students with questions and giving them meaningful problems to solve. Another piece of advice is shifting the emphasis inside the syllabus and inside your program design to task-based or project-based teaching and learning. This is giving students group tasks or individual tasks, giving them rubrics and ways to address those tasks, but then letting them focus on the task rather than focus on teaching a grammar element or teaching something that they can source externally themselves. Some advice on using arts-based teaching and learning. So this is bringing the arts into the classroom. It might be drama, it might be music, it might be visual arts or performance art. It might be movement or kinesthetic or dance. Bringing arts into the classroom gives students more creative space and more opportunity to develop these skills and practice talking while developing the skills. I'm using real-life projects as powerful learning tools and setting these projects for students. Changing your assessment and rethinking your assessment is important. Reinventing your needs analysis. Now, we're often teaching in a system or a place where students are locked into different levels. The needs analysis is already done. They've taken a test, an entry test or some type of indicator on their level, and that's it. There's no further needs analysis that's been done. So the advice here is to rethink what you do as a teacher with your needs analysis in the classroom. Do a needs analysis with all of your students. Check in with your students along the way on their progress, and really make that part of your curriculum design. Flip your classroom. So this has become even more important now as we're using virtual technologies and digital technologies to teach. It's a great idea to take all of that stuff that you were probably teaching in the classroom when you had students on campus. Think about how that can be presented virtually before the actual interaction moment that you have with students, and then maximize that interaction time that you have with students to focus on development of 21st century skills. As I mentioned, great source is the CEFA, and you can find nearly all of these 21st century skills mentioned in there, or at least some similar words used in some of the descriptors and the level descriptors. And we need to really be thinking about teacher training as well. We need to be giving teachers the confidence to explore these 21st century skills in their classrooms. Now, we don't all need to be experts in these skills ourselves. We don't need to be the sage on the stage to give students opportunities to develop them skills themselves. But by taking a step back and rethinking how we teach and thinking of ourselves as facilitators rather than givers of knowledge is a really important mindset to adapt and adopt as a teacher, to make sure that we're giving students space to take ownership over their own learning and explore their own development of the 21st century skills, be judges and critics of their own progress, set their own goals and their own standards and their own objectives for developing these skills, and the teacher being a facilitator and a supporter, a critical friend, and setting up opportunities for students to do that, I think is a really important concept and something that we need to do more in our teacher training. So I'm going to jump back to the question and answers, and then we'll start to go into the kind of last part of our webinar today. So someone's asked about data showing only a few courses embed 21st century skills, and the point that this could be misleading since some people just do not name them as such. And look, I agree with you. There is probably a lot of work that teachers are doing with developing 21st century skills inside the classroom. But my analysis came from looking at the syllabus documents and looking at the way the courses are designed. And often it's not explicit in the course design to develop those 21st century skills. So I think by making them explicit, we're going to give opportunities for teachers to really put them at the forefront of what they're teaching, rather than as a second option or a supplementary option in the program. Someone's asked about what do I think of when we talk about hard skills and soft skills, and look, good question. And I think it's a little bit of an outdated dichotomy talking about hard skills and soft skills, because I don't think there is a clean cut between the two. I mean, in the past, when we've talked about soft skills, we've talked about developing negotiating skills or developing persuasion. So these types of skills that are not kind of content or discipline related, but are important. I don't think it's such a clear dichotomy or a clean cut divide between hard skills and soft skills. I think skills are skills, and we've got a whole range of them. We have the discipline related stuff that we need to teach in the classroom, and the language focused material that we need to teach. But I think this approach to teaching skills, and many of them are soft skills, is something that's left behind, and it's not a priority. Someone asked about in what ways do I do a needs assessment and a needs analysis? Really good question. Certainly something that I've seen done in the classroom, at the very beginning, is throwing students literally in the deep end. So a needs analysis is giving students a task, giving them an opportunity to do something, and not telling them how to do it in any way, literally throwing them in the deep end, observing them, and then giving them feedback on how they performed in that task, and then revisiting that task again in different ways with increasing difficulty throughout the course. So a needs analysis can be done at the beginning, but in my view, a needs analysis is really about engaging students consistently with scaffolding activities of increasing difficulty and giving them feedback, throughout the whole program. And so needs analysis it's a continuous activity. Good questions. Thank you. Let's move on and just finish up with our webinar. I've got so much to share, so I hope this can be a continuing discussion. I hope you've got an idea that, the 21st century skills are dynamic, they're changing, they're not just the 4 C's, there's a whole range of them, and it's all about context, and it's all about thinking more globally and thinking about the outcomes that we want our students to have at the end of our programs. And it's all about making our programs more relevant to the universities that we are pathwaying to, but also more relevant to the source countries that we will be receiving students from. So, if you're doing a long general English program in Australia, I think you've got to really rethink how you deliver that program to make it relevant and make it fit with what's happening globally. This is a great book to have a look at. I just wanted to reinforce that, as teachers, we're change agents, and we need to view ourselves as change agents, and we need to view our classrooms simultaneously as a machine, because they are a part of an ecosystem, they are a part of an economy, but they are also a political system. What we do is political. What we share and how we give students opportunities to develop is a political act, and we need to be mindful of that. But we also are working within an organism, and everything is in a state of flux all the time, as we've seen and been really challenged about over the last 18 months. And also TESOL and teaching English needs to reflect what's happening in the world and our global realities. Things are changing. Native speakers are the minority. Second language English language speakers are becoming the majority. And so we need to adjust what we do and make relevant what we do inside our English language classrooms to address that. So back to a little bit of reflection, focus questions. How can you implement 21st century skills into your classes? How has recent transformation impacted the way that you view teaching English? How can you embed 21st century skills more widely in the student experience? And what are the barriers? So these were the focus questions I asked you at the beginning. I'd like you just to take a minute, just to choose again one of these focus questions and see how your answer may have changed as a result of the last 60 minutes or so. Okay. So thank you. I'd like to extend an invitation to all of you to join our conference next year, our conference theme in May. It's a long way off, but we're starting to plan already. It's a really important event for NES, and it's a way for us to connect with everybody in Australia and also all of our international community. So just an invitation to attend. You might want to put that in your calendars already to save the date. It's next year, the 5th and 6th of May. At the conference, we will be exploring communities of practice as a key theme. And our communities of practice at NES are 2 types. One set is aligned with the quality assurance framework. We have a community of practice for school preparation, a community of practice for ELT qualifications and education agents. We also have special interests communities of practice as well, one on arts-based pedagogy in ELT, one on research in ELT, and one on leadership in ELT. I invite you to join our communities of practice. They'll be featured at our conference next year, but from now to the conference in May, we will be building these communities of practice and calling for expressions of interest for conveners for our communities of practice and also participants. So look out for our NES news and I invite you to join our community of practice. If you're not endorsed with NES, there's information on the website about how to become endorsed. If you're conducting online courses as well and you want those endorsed, we'd be happy to support you in that. And if you're an individual teacher or an ELT professional, we have micro-credentialing, which is available on the website. You can do courses like these webinars, or you can do asynchronous courses on NES Online. If you do those courses, eventually you will accrue badges and you can work towards our Master Practitioner in English Language Teaching, which is our Capstone credential for individuals. There's more information on that on our website, and I'd love for you to join us in NES Online and at our future webinars. You can accrue CPD points by doing that. To get a CPD points for this course, my colleague Cameron's going to put the correct URL in the chat room, but you can check this out on NES Online and you'll receive a follow-up email, of course, after this webinar. Thank you to everyone for participating today. We have all of the links and are available. And I invite you to join our future webinars. We've got one coming up on September 1st, Quality Assurance 101, and then another one a couple of weeks later, Student Engagement Strategies for English Language Teaching. So we're going to wrap up there with a survey. So thank you once again for joining me, giving me your valuable time. Like I said at the beginning, my heart goes out to everyone in lockdown, and I'm glad you could get out of your lockdown space and join us for 60 minutes today. Thank you for your fantastic questions. And thanks for participating. And if you could just do this quick survey before you finish, we'll leave this up on the screen for a little while, and let us know how we go. We're always open to improvement and would love to hear from you on any of your suggestions on how we can do better in our webinars. So thank you. Thanks for joining, and thanks, Cameron, for helping us out, and we'll leave this up. And I'd just like to say goodbye and thanks. Thank you.